Today, let's talk about the blood and gold of Tunisia, this being their most successful club, Espêrance Sportive de Tunis. The club is a little over 100 years old. They've used their iconic yellow and red stripes, which gives them that nickname blood and gold, for just about as long, since the 1920s. This is their home kit from 2011, which is a very iconic year for the club, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Being the biggest club in the country, they also have a lot of rivalries. The biggest one and most important one for them is the Tunis Derby, which they compete against Club Africain. They also play in the same stadium, which is to the south of the city and out towards the sea. The other two big matches for the club each season within the country, outside the capital of Tunis and further south in the country, are with Étoile du Sahel, as well as Club Sfaxion. I'd say they're also building out rivalries with teams outside of Tunisia this century as well. If you go further east, you'll see that they have a rivalry in Egypt with Al Ahly, the biggest club on the entire continent, seeing as the two have met in the Champions League final there 2 different times. If you head out west from Tunisia, you'll see that Wydad in Casablanca of Morocco have competed with them 3 times in massive matches in continental competition. And that Champions League final in 2018, which they defended the following year in 2019, is amongst 4 Champions League titles that the club have on the continent of Africa, making them the 4th most successful club in the history of the competition. They compound that international success with a Cup Winners' Cup in Africa in 1997, as well as a record 3 Arab Club Champions Cups. That's a competition that's held between clubs in the Arab world, so the north of Africa, as well as into the Asian Federation of Clubs, into Saudi Arabia, as well as further east into Asia. Domestic competition and success has 32 league titles for them, as well as 15 times winners of the Tunisian Cup competition and 6 times winning the league's Super Cup at the beginning of the year. My fun facts for you about the club is this is probably the only club in the world that is named after a coffee house. L'Espérance is a cafe in the capital of Tunis, where the club's founders once met even before they had the idea of founding this club. And finally, noting what their most successful era is, that being the 90s into the 2000s, seeing as 98 to 2004, they won the league 7 times in a row. And harkening back to this jersey from 2011, that being their most successful year in itself, they won a treble, seeing as they won the Continental title, the Champions League, as well as the Cup and the league in the country. Let's talk some former players with names that you need to know when you know this club. The first being Tarak Diab, who is a name you should know for Tunisian football as well, seeing as he's the only Tunisian to ever win the African Footballer of the Year award. And on top of that, he's the most successful player and probably the most important in the history of Tunisia itself. Second name to mention would be from the early 90s, that being the Zambian striker Kenneth Melitali. He came to the club, he played 4 seasons there, and he was Tunisia's top scorer within the league for 2 out of those 4. I have 2 players in their current squad for you. The first being Youssouf Oumarou. He's a player they signed just this season and an important attacking midfielder for them. And the second would be their best defender, and I'd say Tunisia's best defender in the last decade, that being Yassine Maria. He's a center back and was a member of Tunisia's squad at the last World Cup, where they had a pretty impressive victory over France, 1-0. So that's your rundown on Espérance Sportive de Tunis. This is our first Tunisian club that we've talked about on my channel.